Notre Dame and Ohio State, two great teams, two of the biggest brands in college football, probably, two huge fan bases. Big news on both sides. Obviously, we know Jim Knowles is the new defensive coordinator for Ohio State. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but without further ado, Drew, go ahead and get into your preview and prediction, man.
Marcus Freeman, first-year head coach. I genuinely don't know if you can have a tougher draw week one than what this guy is facing right now. I mean, you're going on the road to Ohio State, one of the toughest places to play in all of college football. You're going in with a lot of new faces, which I'll get into in a little bit in terms of Notre Dame's personnel. And you're 14.5 underdogs. I mean, when I get to talk about this, there is almost no advantage that Notre Dame has other than maybe the offensive line. Let's first talk about Ohio State. Obviously, we know what Ohio State is, and you can't talk about them without talking about their offense. You have a Heisman candidate quarterback in C.J. Stroud. Everyone knows that. You have a top 5 running back in Travion Henderson, who's going to put up a lot of rushing yards this year. You have 4 or 5 receivers that are probably going to be playing on Sundays, and then you have a talented offensive line on top of that. I mean, there's going to be nothing that any of these teams that Ohio State plays is going to be able to do. Ohio State is going to put up points, and they're going to put up points quick. And so with that being said, I think Notre Dame's game plan, and I'll get into personnel in a minute, Notre Dame is going to have to find ways to extend drives. That is the only way Notre Dame can keep this competitive. You're going to have to find a way to extend drives to 10 plays, 15 plays, and you're not going to be doing it by going through the air. It's going to have to be runs, and more runs, exactly what Michigan did against Ohio State last year, and that's what Michigan got. That's how they got the win. Notre Dame's going to have to follow that same blueprint. Now, Notre Dame, Jack Cohn's gone, starting quarterback from last year. Kyron Williams, starting running back, he's gone. And those are two of probably your most influential people on your offense last year. So you're going in with a new quarterback who's had minimum experience. He's played, but he has not performed well in the times he has played. You do have a lot of talent at running back, and you are deep at the running back position. The only thing is there's just not a lot of experience there. You do have Chris Tyree. He's touched the ball a good bit of times, and he's very, very good. I don't know if he's going to be able to replicate what Kyron Williams did, but he's going to be just fine for you guys. That's not a concern. You have a very good offensive line. As far as defense goes, this is the biggest concern for me. You ranked 64th last year in passing yards allowed, and we all know Ohio State and what they can do through the air. You're going to have to find a way to send pressure, and you're just going to have to find ways to take pressure off that secondary. If you don't do that, Ohio State's going to score every time they touch the ball, and not just field goals. I'm talking touchdowns. They will score touchdowns if you just give C.J. Stroud time in the pocket to light you up. As far as offense goes, I mentioned it earlier, you're going to have to run the ball. Tyler Buckner, he's not in any way, shape, or form going to be a great quarterback who's going to come in and throw for 300 yards and throw you a pair of touchdowns. That's just not going to happen. The environment is going to be so hostile. It's going to be rowdy. For a quarterback that's not experienced, you can't expect him to have a great performance in week one. As far as Ohio State goes, you did lose to Oregon last year in a very similar situation. You play in a big team who a lot of people did write off. Everyone wrote off Oregon. No one thought they had a chance. And Ohio State, laid an egg. Don't let this happen again. You cannot let this happen again this year. I think this is Ohio State's year, or the potential to be Ohio State's year. You have an offense that could be very comparable to the LSU 2019 offense if they live up to the standards. And your defense, I haven't really talked about Ohio State's defense. Everyone knows last year Ohio State's defense was not good. Some might even say average at best. If you struggle with stopping the run in this game, this will be a closer game than you think. I know Ohio State, they're 14.5 points favorites. Ohio State is 14.5 points better than Notre Dame. If this game was 17.5 or 20 points in Ohio State's favor, I still would probably be leaning towards Ohio State. And before Notre Dame fans, you start throwing your chair in rage, punching your holes in your monitor and wall because I just picked you to lose to Ohio State by a big margin, you do have a chance to win this game. You really do. I know all the odds are stacked against you, but the point is you're going to have to find ways to run the ball, get first downs, keep that defense off the field. That is the only chance you have if you want to keep this game competitive. You could do that and still lose the game, but that's your best chance. Give me Ohio State in the 14.5. There is just no way I can lead towards Notre Dame in this one.
Yeah, Drew, and just touching on your point you just made, I think that Notre Dame knows that they're going to have to run the ball and keep the ball away from Ohio State, which leans into their strength, which, like you were saying, was their offensive line. Watching film on Notre Dame's offense, their offensive line, by far, was the position group that stood out to me the most on both sides of the ball. The push that they got in the run game was outstanding, and the pocket that they were able to set and the way that they were to protect their quarterback from pressure almost on a pretty consistent basis was also outstanding. So they're definitely going to rely on their strength and run the ball with behind those big dudes, up front. And like you said, they have a staple of running backs, unproven, but there are Logan Diggs is a guy who I saw had a lot of touches freshman year. He ran the ball like a hoss, but for the most part, unproven guys. Going into Ohio State, week one, it's going to be a huge game. Transferring over to Ohio State, talking about their defense with Jim Knowles. Obviously, we know Jim Knowles over at Oklahoma State for 4 years. Absolute mastermind, genius. Some would say probably the greatest defensive coordinator in college football right now. What he was able to do at Oklahoma State in just the short time he was there was unprecedented. And, obviously he earned the right to come over here and be Ryan Day's DC. And I think that is what's going to turn Ohio State into a national championship contending team. Jim Knowles is bringing the 4-2-5 over, but it's unique from the standard 4-2-5 you might see anywhere else. Instead of using a strong safety outside linebacker hybrid, they use a true nickel. And also, instead of using a true DN, they use an edge rusher outside linebacker hybrid, which those two things in and of itself aren't unusual, but the way that they're able to manipulate coverages and use rotations on the back end with their secondary, and the way that they're able to move that edge rusher, they can do an odd front or any type of 3-down lineman front out of the 4-2-5 and move that edge rusher just to whatever side of the ball over the guard where they need more run support. I think it's going to be really interesting week one to see what Jim Knowles does, because he knows that Notre Dame's coming to run the ball too. So what steps is he going to take to stop it? Also, at Oklahoma State's early years when he first became defensive coordinator, they were very aggressive and ran a lot of man. So I do expect that coming from Ohio State this year, and obviously I think they got the talent to do that. They got talent everywhere. And before I get into Notre Dame, both of these teams are great teams. When we give a critique or something, we're not saying that these guys are trash in any way, shape, or form. But 10-2 does not need to be the expectation for either of these teams. They got to be prepared to take the next step here. With that said, getting into Notre Dame's defense, they run a 3-4, very physical team all the way around, even to their DBs. They love to come up and fill the run. They blitz their cornerbacks very often last year, which shows that they trust those guys filling the run and coming downfield and delivering a hit. Very experienced pass rushers, experienced D-line. I really like their D-line as well. And linebackers love to come up and fill the holes, and they're good rushing off the edge, but the main thing that worries me is their pass defense. Like you were saying, when I get my perspective on defenses, I'm a defensive guy. I don't like to get any outside perspective. I like to look at the film and get my own conclusions. And the statistics you said earlier really ring true to what I'm about to say. Watching film, having linebackers having to guard these slot receivers and wide receivers like you usually do in a 3-4, it puts you at a disadvantage in the passing game. In the middle of the field and the seams were open a lot in film. And, with the amount of talent that Ohio State has at wide receiver, these guys are going to be playing on Sunday, a lot of them. So it's going to be real hard for Notre Dame to come up with a way to neutralize Ohio State's passing game with the deficit that they're setting, having 4 linebackers on the field at once. Getting into Notre Dame's offense, the biggest takeaway was their O-line. Watching all the position groups, they were by far and away the best position group out of all of them. They are losing their running back from last year, 2 times 1,000-yard rusher, like you mentioned. They have a staple of backs that they might be able to step in and fill some of the shoes, but he was a haul, so it's going to be hard to say. They are bringing Harry Houston to coach O-line, which is going to have a big impact on just their mentality as an offense. And I'm going to be interesting to see how it changes. Like you said, with the freshman quarterback, you're not going to be doing as much in the air or as many crazy or complex things. You're going to be relying a lot more on the basics. So how is that culture for Notre Dame's offense going to change? And the culture for Notre Dame in general, a lot of the times the culture of a team is built around the O-line coach or the defensive coordinator. That's going to be interesting to see. But getting into my prediction, basically I just think that Ohio State has too many weapons, too much firepower on offense for Notre Dame to keep up. even if Notre Dame does get a couple stops, it's, Ohio State's going to hit eventually. Like you mentioned, this is one of the best this is one of the best offenses rather that we've seen coming into college football, up there with the LSU offense that you mentioned. So it's going to be a David versus Goliath performance required from Notre Dame to pull this off. I do like the 14.5 only because the main reason I like the 14.5 is because of the acquisition of Jim Knowles for Ryan Day in Ohio State. I'm a huge fan of what he does. I really do think that he's going to have a major impact this year on Ohio State in the years to come. And I think he's the main reason that I think Ohio State can be a national championship contender.
Yeah, and I don't know if we brought this up yet. Maybe we did, maybe we haven't. I'm not sure. Notre Dame, Kyle Hamilton's gone. He was a safety for Notre Dame and the best player on their defense last year. He's gone to the NFL. That's a big spot to fill. And the whole thing, like the timing of this game just couldn't be any worse. Had this game been later in the season, maybe I would have had a easier choice, maybe a better chance of picking Notre Dame in the points. But there's just too many holes to fill for Notre Dame, and Ohio State's bringing back so many players and a lot of talent back that I just don't see any way, shape, or form I can take Notre Dame. And again, Notre Dame, like, fans should not be offended when I say Notre Dame's going to lose this game by more than 2 scores. There's going to be a lot of teams that play Ohio State this year that are going to be losing by 2 touchdowns or more. There's no shame. Notre Dame's just going to have to take this. And if they do lose big, it's just going to have to be used as motivation and a learning curve for the rest of the season, because Notre Dame is going to win a lot of games this year. They still are a top 5 team for a real reason. There's a lot of talent. So I wouldn't be too ashamed if you lose this game and it's not really competitive. With that being said, this video is getting a little long. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. As always, guys, please like, comment, subscribe, share the video. And leave down below in the comments whether you agree or disagree with our picks, and we'll definitely be taking a look at those. Our last video we did really well. If you guys are returning and watching this one as well, we really do appreciate the support. You guys have no idea. If you have any suggestions for preview and prediction games that we should do, and we are going to be doing some more before the season rolls around, but leave those down below in the comments as well, and we'll get to that. Anyways, you guys have a good day. I'll see y'all later.